glass, looked straight at me in front of hundreds of his elite business colleagues, and chuckled into the microphone. "And this is my daughter," he announced, his voice dripping with condescension. "No degree, no real future, just freeloading off the family name." The room erupted into polite, snickering laughter. My siblings smirked, completely satisfied to see me publicly humiliated yet again. But I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just calmly lifted my own glass, locked eyes with my father, and spoke clearly into the sudden quiet. "Cheers, Dad. This is the absolute last time any of you will ever see me." Then, I turned around and walked out, leaving the room in a suffocating, dead silence. They all thought I was running away in shame. They had no idea I was actually walking out to take away everything they owned. Growing up, my life was defined by a single, exhausting word: competition. My name is Anna Richardson, and at 28 years old, I am the official black sheep of the Richardson bloodline. In our household, love wasn't something you felt. It was something you earned by collecting Ivy League degrees, corporate titles, and country club memberships. My father, a titan in the commercial shipping industry, treated his children like corporate investments. My older brother and younger sister understood the rules of the game perfectly. They went to elite boarding schools, secured high-paying finance internships by the time they were 20, and constantly looked down on anyone who didn't fit into their flawless, upper-class mold. Then there was me. I didn't want a desk job at a hedge fund, and I certainly didn't want to spend my life chasing my father's conditional approval. When I dropped out of my prestigious university during my sophomore year to pursue a hands-on technical career in maritime logistics and heavy supply chain operations, my father essentially erased me from his life. To him, working in the rugged, gritty environment of the actual shipping docks, managing shipping containers, coordinating port logistics, and dealing directly with freight captains was a deep embarrassment. He labeled me as uneducated and worthless to his elite friends, completely blind to the reality of what I was building. For 6 years, I worked under a completely different corporate banner, changing my professional identity and earning my stripes on the front lines of the industry. By 28, I wasn't just surviving. I had quietly climbed the ladder to become a senior regional operations supervisor for the largest logistics conglomerate on the West Coast, completely independent of my family's name. The ballroom of the Grand Regent Hotel was a sea of crystal chandeliers, expensive champagne, and suffocating arrogance. It was my father's retirement gala, an event celebrating his 40 years at the helm of Richardson Shipping, and the guest list was packed with the city's most powerful executives. I had only attended out of a lingering, old sense of duty, sitting quietly at a back table in a simple navy dress while my siblings paraded around the room like royalty. As the evening peaked, my father took to the stage, microphone in hand, basking in the standing ovation. He delivered a flawless speech about legacy, leadership, and hard work, looking over at my brother and sister with immense public pride. But then, his cold eyes scanned the back of the room and landed directly on me. He decided his night of absolute triumph needed a punchline. "Of course," he chuckled into the microphone, his voice echoing across the ballroom. "Not everyone inherits the executive drive. This is my other daughter, Anna. No degree, no real future, just freeloading off the family name and drifting through life." The room instantly erupted into polite, snickering laughter. My siblings smirked, thoroughly enjoying my public humiliation. I didn't flinch. I just stood up, calmly lifted my glass toward the stage, and let the laughter die down until the room went completely silent. "Cheers, Dad," I said clearly. "This is the last time any of you will ever see me." Then I turned and walked out. 6 months passed like a blur, and I kept my promise perfectly. I blocked my family's numbers, ignored their occasional emails, and read every ounce of my energy into my corporate role. I didn't need their world, and I certainly didn't need their toxic validation. While I was quietly thriving in my career, managing multi-million-dollar supply chains across the coast, my father's precious legacy was beginning to crumble. Richardson Shipping, now left in the hands of my highly educated but completely incompetent siblings, was bleeding money rapidly. They understood spreadsheet formulas and country club networking, but they knew absolutely nothing about the harsh realities of global logistics. A massive, unprecedented bottleneck hit the major shipping ports, crippling supply chains nationwide. My siblings panicked. They mismanaged fuel surcharges, insulted critical labor unions, and failed to secure priority docking berths. Within weeks, container ships carrying their most lucrative clients' cargo were stranded miles out at sea, racking up devastating daily fines. The company's flagship contract with a global retail giant was on the verge of being permanently canceled due to these severe delays. My father was forced to come out of his short-lived retirement, desperate to save the family fortune from a humiliating public bankruptcy. But his old-school connections meant nothing in this modernized, fast-paced crisis. They needed an absolute miracle, or the Richardson empire would vanish before the end of the month. They were completely blind to the fact that the only person who could grant that miracle was the daughter they had cast aside as worthless. With their backs completely against the wall, my family had only one desperate option left. They reached out to Vanguard Logistics, the multi-billion-dollar supply chain conglomerate that controlled 90% of the priority docking berths and distribution networks on the coast. Vanguard possessed the infrastructure, the political leverage, and the immediate resources to clear the bottleneck and save Richardson Shipping from total liquidation. My father used every remaining favor he had just to secure an emergency meeting at Vanguard's high-rise corporate headquarters. They walked into the building expecting to meet with a nameless, high-level executive who they could easily manipulate with their prestigious degrees and smooth corporate jargon. I watched them from the security monitors as they arrived. My father looked visibly older, his face lined with the immense stress of a failing empire. My brother and sister were frantically adjusting their designer suits, trying desperately to project an aura of wealth and stability that they no longer possessed. They were led into the main executive boardroom, a sprawling room with panoramic views of the very docks where they had once mocked my career choice. They sat down at the massive mahogany table, laying out their financial proposals and preparing to beg for a life raft. They genuinely believed that their polished presentation and elite family background would be enough to command respect in this room. They had absolutely no idea that Vanguard's regional operations were completely decentralized, or that the senior executive director, who held the absolute power to either approve their rescue package or sign their bankruptcy papers, was already standing right outside the door, watching their desperation grow with every passing minute. The heavy double doors of the boardroom swung open with an authoritative click, and the room went completely silent. I stepped inside, dressed in my sharp corporate supervisor attire and carrying a sleek tablet. The immediate reaction from across the table was worth every single year of grueling labor on the shipping docks. My father's jaw dropped so low, I thought it might shatter against the polished mahogany. The color instantly drained from my brother's face, turning him a sickly shade of gray, while my sister gripped her designer purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. They stared at me as if they were looking at a ghost. "Anna," my father whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of utter disbelief. "What on earth are you doing here? This is a highly confidential executive meeting." I didn't smile, and I didn't offer a warm greeting. I walked to the head of the table, pulling out the center leather chair, the seat reserved exclusively for the person running the meeting. "My name is Director Richardson," I said, my tone completely flat and professionally detached. "And you are here to ask Vanguard Logistics for an emergency bailout. So please sit down and let's look at your numbers." My siblings glanced at each other in pure, unadulterated terror as the brutal reality finally began to sink into their minds. The daughter they had publicly mocked as uneducated and worthless was the exact same person who now held the absolute fate of their entire life's work in her hands. I opened the digital folder on my tablet, looking down at their failing business metrics with the cold, calculated eye of a senior executive evaluating a low-tier, incompetent vendor who was wasting my corporate time. My brother was the first to break the suffocating silence, his voice instantly shifting into a desperate, pleading tone. "Anna, please, you have to help us. We're family. If Vanguard doesn't grant us priority access to those docking berths by Friday, Richardson Shipping will completely collapse." My sister nodded rapidly, her synthetic confidence completely gone as she reached across the table. We know we've had our differences, but blood is thicker than water, right? Think about everything Dad built. I looked at them, completely unmoved by their sudden, convenient display of affection. It was a masterful performance, but I had spent 22 years watching how they treated outsiders, and I knew exactly how shallow their loyalty ran. When you humiliated me at the gala 6 months ago, I said, my voice cutting through the room like ice, you made it very clear where I stood in this family. You told the entire world that I was nothing more than a worthless freeloader. My father tried to speak, his eyes wide with a mixture of panic and shame. Anna, I was just joking. I was trying to motivate you. Save it, Dad. I interrupted, closing the tablet with a sharp snap. In the logistics business, we don't operate on emotions or family favors. We operate on sheer competence. Your company mismanaged labor unions, ignored basic bottleneck protocols, and put our regional trade routes at risk. Vanguard does not bail out failing vendors. As of this moment, your application for emergency priority docking is officially denied. Our legal team will send the formal termination papers by morning. They walked out of that boardroom entirely broken, realizing that their pride had cost them everything. Within 2 months, Richardson Shipping filed for bankruptcy, and my siblings had to find real jobs for the very first time in their lives. Standing by the window of my Ocean View office, watching the massive container ships glide smoothly into the port, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. I had built my success completely on my own terms. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Would you have bailed them out, or would you let them face the consequences? City you are watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. Meanwhile, click on the screen to watch 2 other favorite stories that will definitely surprise you.